We are on 6.26. Up next is Violetta Nikolskaya. Violetta?
I'm here. Are you able to see me and hear me?
I am able to see you and hear you. Welcome. Nice to see you.
Excellent. You as well. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairperson. I'm honored to be speaking to you on the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. I'm Violetta Nikolskaya, Senior Analyst for YWCA Hamilton, which is the city's oldest and largest multi-service women's organization, having served this community for over 130 years. We're proud to be part of the Just Recovery Hamilton Collective. We support the recommendations set out by the collective. Before COVID-19, YWCA Hamilton served over 10,000 children and adults of all genders every year through our programming in over 30 sites. We've continued to serve thousands throughout the pandemic by way of our residential programming, our developmental services, our childcare services, our virtual health and wellness programs, our entrepreneurship programs, our employment and training programming, our remote senior services, and our newcomer programming, just to name a few. We continue to respond to the urgent needs of our community in every way we can. 12 months ago, I stood before you and advised, quote, there is overwhelming evidence that gender equity boosts economic growth. Applying a gender equity lens to the process of developing and operationalizing a budget is both good governance and results in increased financial, physical, and social accessibility for its users, end quote. Since then, our community has been struggling to combat a deadly virus while maintaining its livelihood. In Canada, 56% of women workers are concentrated in occupations known as the 5 Cs: caring, cashiering, catering, cleaning, and clerical functions. Women constitute 90% of Canadian nurses, 75% of respiratory therapists, and 90% of personal support workers in long-term care and nursing homes. As a result, more women than men have had to risk their health and safety in order to continue working. Across Canada, more women have died than men, in part because women have been pushed to the front lines of the pandemic response. Without a strong equity-focused infrastructure, our community has seen women overrepresented amongst those that were furloughed or laid off during the earliest months of the pandemic. Women represented 70% of all job losses in Canada, and unlike men, were unable to access employment as readily following the first wave. Crisis line calls from women have increased. Survivors of violence are impacted by lack of adequate income supports, safe and fair workplaces, and access to affordable basic services like childcare, transportation, digital access, and elder care. The pandemic has had clear impacts on our collective physical and mental health, the division of gendered labor within the home and within our society, child and family responsibilities, and our safety at home. At the onset of the pandemic, economists and policy analysts warned that women would pay a heavier price than men during the pandemic-induced recession, and that without swift action, decades of advances in women's labor forces participation would recede. For a community to respond adequately to the aforementioned issues, they must understand and prioritize gender equity. This includes investing in affordable childcare, ensuring comprehensive responses to the issue of gender-based violence and domestic violence, and proactively engaging in an equitable social procurement of labor. Municipalities that prioritize gender equity would receive guidance from a Gender Advisory Council on pandemic policies. 12 months ago, I quoted Jasmine Ramsey Rezai, Director of Advocacy of YWCA Toronto, when she said that, quote, life for Black, Indigenous, racialized, and newcomer women, women with disabilities, and senior women is harder than ever before. Business as usual is simply not sufficient, end quote. It was true then, and now it resonates with such force. Black, Indigenous, and racialized women have been impacted the most during this pandemic. This is seen most in the disproportionate rates of hospitalization and mortality. Once again, this is because of the high concentration of BIPOC heroes on the front lines of the 5C occupations. We cannot afford to ignore this truth. I speak to you following a collaborative effort to produce the Just Recovery for Hamilton report. The recommendations outlined in the report will benefit all Canadians, but some specifically aim at tackling systemic barriers and improving economic security for women. Hamilton City Council has already taken the important step of instituting a gender and equity lens to its decision-making. It's crucial that this council apply this viewpoint to any and all local recovery efforts. If decision-makers fail to specifically consider the needs of women, we will be left behind. A just recovery for Hamilton must focus on communities in the city that have experienced this disproportionate negative impacts of the pandemic. We cannot meet deep inequality and hidden challenges the current pandemic has exposed with fear and austerity. Thank you.
Thank you, Violetta. I'm going to look to members of council. Are there any questions of Violetta? I don't see any. Thank you. It's always good to see you, and I appreciate your input today.
Thank you so much.